So from Tel Aviv right now is the former Israeli government spokesperson, Eylon Levy, joining us. Does that mean that the ceasefire has been broken?
Hezbollah has definitely been breaking the ceasefire because it's not interested in a ceasefire. It wants a forever war against Israel. But let's wait and see what happens out of the rest of the peace talks in Washington, because Israel wants a full peace agreement with Lebanon, not another ceasefire that allows Iran's proxy army to continue rebuilding. Now, look, I'll tell you the truth. Israelis are very skeptical about this peace process, because the problem is that Lebanon doesn't control its own territory. Hezbollah is able to fire even without the permission of the Lebanese government. So we need to see some good faith confidence building measures from the Lebanese government. Canceling the law that makes it a criminal offense to speak to Israelis would be a good start. The US reportedly pushing for that, so that we get a clear statement from the Lebanese that they're really interested in genuine peace and not just trying to buy time as Hezbollah rearms under everyone's noses.
I do want to go back to that map. We had to have it on the telestrator here just to ask one point about the southern part of Lebanon. And this point right in here, that Israel said it will remain in Lebanon within 10 kilometers of the border, so the southern part of Lebanon. Some Lebanese officials have been saying if that's the case, they're just going to face resistance throughout. What about that as a strategy from Israel's point of view? What would you say?
Yeah, Israel went into southern Lebanon because Hezbollah, Iran's proxy army, was using it to fire missiles, drones, and anti-tank fire at Israeli families who are simply sitting ducks for attacks over the border. Lebanon did not control that territory. That was Hezbollah territory. And Israel is telling Lebanon, you want this territory? Fine. We will give it back to a Lebanese state that can control the territory and maintain a peaceful border with Israel. But we're not conceding this territory to Hezbollah. And that's what an Israeli withdrawal would mean. It would mean giving this territory back to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps proxy army, so that Hezbollah can continue to attack Israeli families. They're so close they can literally shoot at Israeli families using guns at people sitting straight in their living room. So that's not going to happen. It can go back to Lebanon if it can maintain a peaceful border. That land's not going back to Hezbollah.
Do you even see any point in having a conversation about Lebanon's proper government, or is that pointless with Hezbollah being the one that you're worried about here? For example, the Lebanese presidency's official account on X put something out earlier where they said diplomacy is war without blood, whereas war is the shedding of blood, destruction, and ruin. Negotiations do not mean concession or surrender, but rather solving problems. And it's important for the Lebanese to stand by their state in this particular circumstance as they're weary of these wars. So, I would read that and say, all right, well, I guess they want to talk, they want to negotiate, but does any of that matter given what we've just discussed with Hezbollah?
Well, Lebanon, for the first time, is getting serious about dismantling Hezbollah. We're seeing real voices within Lebanon saying, enough is enough. You can't keep dragging us into conflict time and time again. But it's Israel's military action in Lebanon that is making it urgent for the Lebanese state to do something they're desperate to avoid, which is to confront Hezbollah. And let's be clear, if Israel were to withdraw tomorrow, that would hand a victory to Hezbollah, it would hand a victory to Iran, and it would doom Lebanon to being a failed state under the occupation of the Islamic Republic. So we need to see a pincer movement here. Israel from the south and Lebanon from the north, dismantling Hezbollah so that Hezbollah is gone, and then we can have a peaceful border between two states that can live in peace. Really encouraging that in the joint statement between the countries, they said, we're not at war. There is no state of war between us. The problem is Hezbollah, and we both need to act against it together.
One other quick thing. Now that the talks between the United States and Iran, brokered by Pakistan, have not even begun, and J.D. Vance, the vice president, hasn't even left Washington, doesn't look like there's going to be any deal anytime soon unless something very unexpected happens here, right? So how is that news received within Israel?
I think Israel is watching the absence of negotiations with concern. We know there is a real chance that President Trump will order military action again. Iran will fire ballistic missiles at Israel again, and the Israeli army will fight again together with the United States to stop the Iranian regime from obtaining nuclear weapons. Right now, the Iranians are playing for time. They're stalling. They're hoping that a combination of market pressure, domestic pressure, the PSYOPs campaign they're running against the American public, frankly, are going to force President Trump to accept a deal that leaves open their path to nuclear weapons. And President Trump has to be absolutely clear. You're not getting another extension. If you do not accept a deal that blocks your path to nuclear weapons, we're resuming the war, we're going to destroy your offensive capabilities, we're going to seize Karg Island, and the leaders who've been granted immunity so they can negotiate, you're on the target list. You need to negotiate a deal that ends the threat, or it's over for you.
Well, I guess what I was asking, you said that you're watching it with concern, but isn't there a way of looking at it from Israel's point of view where, you know, in the short term, this is what Israel Netanyahu wants. They didn't want the war to be over yet. There's more to do. Isn't that the perspective? Or?
Look, ideally, we'd love it if President Trump could pull a rabbit out of his hat and get a deal that ends the triple threat of Iran's nuclear program, its ballistic missiles, and its proxy armies. But we're being realistic. The Iranians have no interest in doing that. They're buying time. And that's why Israel is ready, of course, to continue that joint action together with the United States, both air forces fighting together. If diplomacy fails, if diplomacy can't block Iran's path to a nuclear weapon, then Israel and the U.S. are going to have to stop it together.
Eylon Levy from Tel Aviv, thank you, sir, as always.